Thank you, April. If everyone could join me to salute the flag of our great nation.
Pledge allegiance to the
United States of America, to the republic for which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Everybody can just remain standing for a moment of silence for our troops, their families, and all our first responders. Also, Sal Marchese, who was a business owner in town, lived in town for a long time, and was the president of the BDP, passed away since our last meeting.
Oh.
And
Jackie, the young 8th grader, Jackie Minchella, passed away after completing her 8th grade year. I'm very sorry for that. There's a viewing on Friday at the Oceanside Memorial Home in Lake Como from 6 to 9, and the funeral mass will be at St. Rose on Saturday, July 10th at 11:15. Our best goes out to her family, friends, her classmates. It's very sad.
thank you. All right. First thing on our agenda is we have to go into closed session for a few minutes before we start the meeting. April?
Resolution authorizing executive session, whereas Section 8 of the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, permits the exclusion of the public from a meeting in certain circumstances, and whereas there was adequate notice to the public of this meeting, and whereas the Borough Council is of the opinion that such circumstances presently exist, now therefore be it resolved by the Borough Council as follows. The public shall be excluded from discussion and action upon the hereinafter specified subject matter. The general nature of the subject matter to be discussed is potential litigation or contract negotiations. Minutes will be kept of the closed session. It is anticipated at this time that the above subject matter will be made public when the need for confidentiality no longer exists, and this resolution shall take effect immediately. We have a motion to approve? All in favor?
Aye. We should be back quickly.
Yes.
I'm going to be seeing your friend Dave. We're going up to Canadians when we stop to see Dave and Karen on my way out. Stay over visit a couple nights. In September. Look forward to it. I speak to him periodically. He tends a lot back there. So I told him I was going to start Canadians. He said, "God, stop it," because it's a good halfway point. So it'll be like 5 and 5 hours. So we're going to stay there 2 nights, and then we'll probably hit him one night coming home too. Take advantage of one night coming home. So we'll do that 10-hour. I can't do those 10-hour runs. You know, I used to be able to do that when I was younger. Not anymore. Plus, I'm really looking forward to seeing him. You know.
Tell them we miss them.
I will tell. I will. I saw Nancy at Friday when she was working the table, and this is how bad it was. I went up to the table and she said, "Hi, Trina." I'm like, I had like 26 days, and I'm like, oh my God, that pandemic like just messed me up with everything. Recognizing me, you know.
That's how you get
We're all good. We're all here, right?
Except
In one piece.
I don't like days on it. I haven't spoken to him. When he did come back once. I got a good feeling he misses it.
I'll check it out. No, he says he doesn't. He says he doesn't, but I find it hard to believe. Actually, do you still talk? You talk to Dave periodically, right?
Oh, yeah, I still need help sometimes.
See, for help with the bar. She still talks to him. He thinks he still misses it. He misses the action. What do you think?
Well, he's not getting much action. He's not getting much action.
Right, he gave me the shoes with the guy right now. Did have been.
So you're right, you're right. Markel said that. You miss us.
Now we open
They go to every different. How does that?
It's the guy Now you move to the town, you have entitlement to a grave site. Now, damn town, you're paying taxes. Run yourself. You have a- you have entitlement to a grave site.
So the town owns.
The council is in charge. That's his job.
So what did he say?
He says, no, the cemetery's full. I said, well, isn't that taxation?
that I got today, and so, that'll break up the soil. But you have to have. He said the water, so that's why I was checking the rain tonight. I don't know whether to put it down. Quiet insurance, I get a whole lot of quiet. You don't have to throw it tonight. Plus,
We're rolling down.
so it's not, in order to get down.
Town manager.
Yeah, man, that's the problem. On the side of my house, my husband's side, I have range, but I do that whole area.
That's just interesting.
Yeah, I do my own, that, it's really not a big number.
There's not much going on. There's not much going on.
Yeah. Nobody responds. Yes, they are.
Oh, yeah, in front of my house, I got this little red square spot. I never put any plants in it, it's all mulch. So I just went and went to Belmar, got like 5, 6 bags, and I remulched that area.
I mean, I know it's used to be. Oh, I think it was. Okay. Yeah. At least.
Correct. Exactly.
We're going downhill from there.
That's good. It definitely.
Not if you live there.
Resolution of whatever their, I think they just, they're quite, the ordinance, that folder, do not use this folder, so you can read the ordinance.
I
She wasn't well, but restricted, they're looking for more help like that. You don't know how to he's trying to hire them. He said, I can't get even, you know? That's why I've been there 7 days. I'm not complaining, I'll take the 7 days. I'm a workaholic, I'll leave. I was gonna do one, I was gonna do the thing on my way to see if it's gonna rain or when I get out of here, I'll do it. It's rain yet, definitely 11 o'clock when I get out to Thursday. But then Thursday, Friday, or Friday, we're supposed to get the rest of the hurricane. Tropical storm. Yeah, that's what I noticed. Yes. Next Monday, starting I'll come over 6:30, maybe I'm until about 8. 7:30, go see home. Get done 9:30. Usually about 9:30, 10 o'clock, the cutoff. The younger crowd comes in, the older crowd comes last night. Because I think Harry,
The kids go.
Harry, something was racial problem. Billy got away already. He didn't play it. Someone who's always at the door, without windows, hold up screens. Yes, yes, he did. He did.
And so it's the White House.
That's what goes by.
I didn't post it on Facebook, I didn't post it.
I will let you. Not safe.
Bypass accent.
Yeah, there's,
Running a show for Belmar, they stay, running a computer and myself. We don't go around, anything, they make a they said, you the funds to 501(c), all charitable It really doesn't matter what we sell anymore, you know what? We're only giving them money away. It's the only aspect. Last car I paid last getting to the personality.
yeah, so we're
It's hard, I know. It's like when you're at work. You're home at 5 o'clock, every problem is there, you can. You don't bring them home with them.
has to mine her out. And he's been trying to buy her out. There's no place for her.
I hope so. I sure
She's
do.
up to 5.
And that's why I told him.
Yeah, there's,
Yeah, exactly. We don't need that.
It's always different in New Jersey. My brother was, even before his pandemic.
Yeah,
back in workshop. So I just want to ask our chief of police, when she's here tonight, that give us a little update of how the weekend went.
Good evening, everyone. Over the weekend, we had full force out there with our special officers. Not so much at the beginning of the weekend on the beachfront with the rain, but definitely Sunday and Monday. I was very busy up there. And at night, there was no major issues during the weekend. A lot of quality of life issues. The officers that were out on the streets and full-time officers wrote over 200 summonses, borough ordinances, to include urinating in public, alcohol in public, fake IDs at the liquor establishments, fireworks, littering. They also issued approximately 177 written parking tickets. As far as the park mobile, I have a breakdown for the week, which was 578 summonses for the paid parking. If I had to, not guesstimate, but figure out the number for just this weekend, it was probably around 200 on the park mobile throughout the weekend. But other than that, there was no major incidents. Besides the quality of life issues, and the officers are out there, all I can do is, again, stress to make sure that you're calling the police department if you have an issue or there's concern or complaint, and we will be out there.
Thank you, Chief. And, just the one no-knock ordinance that we have in the first reading tonight. Can you just explain why we're putting that in place?
Yes, so April and I received an email several months ago in reference to a solicitor that would like to solicit in town. And it was brought to our attention that there is an ordinance in Belmar that you can do this. There are certain criteria that you have to meet as far as what the business is, the individuals that will be going around presenting their product, or we have one that's for Water Act or something like that. Usually does it every year. And then we have different criteria. So in that, there was nothing about not being able to go to certain residences. So we scoured around with different ordinances from different towns that have basically a no-knock. So once the ordinance is passed, we're going to come up with, you'll contact the Borough of Belmar. If you don't want to be bothered by these people coming to your door, you'll be put on a list, and anyone that does, address or come to the borough and want to solicit in town, your name will be put on that list that they're not to go to your residence. We are looking to change the time, correct, Mayor?
Yes.
Right now it says you can do it till 9 p.m. We're going to move it up to 6 p.m. But as long as, they produce what their company is doing, give us a list of their employees and who would be going around. They also have to provide us with their identification so that we can check, do a check on them and make sure that they are, good to go. And then that ordinance will be in place, and you'll be able to contact the borough to be put on the no-knock list.
Thank you. Any other council members have anything else they want to bring up as far as the resolutions or ordinances that are on tonight? Before we move on. Everybody good? Okay. All right, we'll move on to petitions. April, we have any?
No, we do not.
Okay. Approval of minutes of the last meeting.
Can I have a motion to approve the June 15th minutes?
Second.
Okay, Councilman Juan? Yes. Councilman McCracken?
Abstain.
Councilman Carvelli?
Yes.
Mayor Walsifer?
Yes. Reports of council. Councilman Carvelli.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Let's see. So the first thing I wanted to bring up was planning board met 2 weeks, last Monday. We welcomed a new member to the planning board, Tony Almeida. We also approved the beach house resolution for rooftop dining. And then we also did a review discussion and ultimately an approval of the flood damage mitigation ordinance, which is on the agenda for tonight. The farmer's market started a couple weeks ago. I was fortunate enough to get out to the first one. It seemed to be off to a good start. It's very interesting. I know there's a couple good vendors down there. We're definitely planning to go back, and I hope that we continue that through the rest of the summer, and we can attract some additional vendors. The other thing that I wanted to bring up tonight was that the Finance Committee has been meeting for about a year now. And we've been in what I'll call like a discovery phase of trying to get a handle on the state of the water and sewer infrastructure here in town and what the cost will be over the next few decades to maintain, repair, and operate those systems. So, like I said, we're in the discovery phase. We're looking to devise a plan of how to proceed. Part of what we've done so far is reviewing what's called the I&I report, which was done back in 2010, and that basically details how much non-sewer water infiltration there is into the system, and identifies the areas that are in need of repair and all that sort of stuff. It turns out that not much was done between 2010 and now. And so one of the things we're doing is having that report updated to see how much worse things actually are. Also, a lesson learned so far has been what's happened on 15th Avenue, where I live. The replacement of the water line there has turned into quite a project. It sounds like when the company that's replacing the water line got down there, they were finding things that they didn't expect. It's causing the price to go up, and be more complex, and a lot of people being inconvenienced for a long period of time. I forget, what is it, 4 blocks?
That's correct.
And what do we pay for that?
Off the top of my head, I don't remember exactly the cost factor, but
$200,000,
Yes.
I believe, and that's without even paving the road yet. So anyway, along with the cost of water quality going up, there's more regulation coming on. Sounds like everything's on the table right now with the Finance Committee. We're assessing all the options, whether or not we keep the system and repair it, sell it to an outside entity, or do like a hybrid, which would be an owner-operated arrangement where we still own the system, responsible for the repairs and whatnot, and then there's an operator that comes in and runs the system for us. So stay tuned on that, but I just wanted to give an update on what the Finance Committee has been up to as it pertains to the water and sewer system. Mayor, did I miss anything?
I think we covered most of it.
Okay, thank you.
The system is old, and we have to come up with a long-range plan on how we're going to handle it.
Yep.
And that's what the Finance Committee has been working on for the past year.
Yep. So that's my report. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Councilman Bracken.
Thank you, Mayor. It's good to be back in person with everybody. No longer have those virtual meetings. Belmar Housing Authority met last evening. All the units in that building are full. The roof has been repaired. Verizon, through a subcontractor, is in the process of updating the wiring in the entire building, so all the residents have access through FiOS. And the parking lot has been paved and restriped, so that area along the back of the building looks much nicer. So great progress and a lot of good things happening at the Belmar Housing Authority. The next Shade Tree Commission meeting is on July 21st, 6 p.m. here in the courtroom. Tonight in the resolutions, you'll see a resolution authoring a grant to be applied for with the Community Forestry Program. That is not to be confused with the hazard tree inventory that the Shade Tree Commission completed some time ago. A report was filed. The Commission had some questions, went back to the company who did that report. That person has gone through and answered or addressed those questions, and and the Shade Tree Commission will be discussing those at this month's meeting. This resolution, number 168 that you see on the agenda, is for a complete tree inventory throughout the town. And what this will do is give a baseline of the trees that we have in our community and allow the Shade Tree Commission to be eligible to apply for future grants. This complete tree inventory hasn't been done quite some time, and it'll be good to have an inventory of the trees in our town. But it's very different from the hazard tree assessment that was done some time ago. So that's my report, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. President Moore.
I'm currently, there it goes. Thank you, Mayor. Currently, I don't have any meetings coming up. Possibly in 2 weeks, I'll be off the days for a little bit. And then I'll have a better report for you in about 2 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you. The only thing I have is I was disappointed that the fireworks had to be canceled Friday night, but weather controlled that. So we'll be postponing and picking a new date. We're working with the company now to find out what will be a good date for us to have a fireworks show. And the only other thing, it was nice to see that 9th Avenue Pier is started the tradition of ringing the bell at sunset and having everybody sing God Bless America. So it was a nice tradition to see, and they started it, and they're going to continue that all summer long. But it's nice to have that in Belmar. And I don't think I have anything else right now. All right, so we'll move on to public session on any resolution items.
If anyone from the public would like to comment on a resolution that's on the agenda, please step forward, state your name and address.
Go ahead, Mr. Kramer.
Gene Kramer, 4th Avenue. I just have a question. This is resolution 2021-171 and authorizing execution of a jurisdictional agreement with NJDOT regarding Route 71. This is kind of interesting. It says it's a jurisdictional agreement involves issues concerning maintenance of Route 71 within the boundaries of Belmar. Now, I know there's been a couple of issues over the years with Route 71 and their jurisdiction over the pedestrian crossing over by the senior building. I'm not sure whether this involves any of that. But actually, I live up the north end. I'm a little more concerned about Route 71 and the replacement of the Main Street Bridge that's going to lead to Avon. I'm just wondering, is this like greasing the skids for NJDOT to use their power of eminent domain in order to acquire right-of-way and move the intersection at Main Street and 5th more over towards Klein's property? If you recall, I guess it was around 4 or 5 years ago that the DOT essentially made a commitment to both Belmar and Avon that the existing bridge would be kept in service while a new bridge would be constructed immediately to the west. And I think that's going to take some change in the roadway arrangement at the north end of town. Quite truthfully, I see it as being an improvement because right now what we have where 5th Avenue comes and intersects Main Street, if you're coming from the east, you have no idea as to whether the bridge is open. You're surrounded by buildings on both sides. I'm just wondering, do we have any idea of what the scope of this agreement actually is?
Yeah, we do, and it doesn't have anything to do with that. I'll let our business administrator explain a little bit further, but it has to do with the money that we got for the lighting on Main Street and what was it?
Yes, Mayor. This was the streets street project for Main Street. In order for us to close the project out, DOT wants us to just sign the agreement. This is from the EDA and the Department of Transportation. So this is just an agreement that we maintain the plowing and things of that nature. They worked on a part on 8th Avenue that they had worked on just a few months ago. So this has nothing to do but with closing an agreement for a grant for streetscape. That's all this is.
Okay, so this has, as far as you know, doesn't have anything to do with the replacement of the bridge?
Has nothing at all to do. In order to.
We haven't heard anything about that
Yeah.
since you did. Yeah, it's been all quiet, so they haven't contacted us on anything about the new bridge. So we know as much as you do.
Yeah, I was gonna say, with all this talk about infrastructure funds here, I guess what we'd like to get is at least our little piece,
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Jack?
Jack Leonard, 12th Avenue. So my question's on 170. What streets are going to be fixed with that money?
Is it the next one, the end of the terrace property? Mr. Aaron?
I'm trying to find which one it is.
Or is that the one being remainder of 15? Oh, it's the remainder of 15th Avenue, that one.
Okay.
So it gets paved all the way to the ocean.
Okay, yeah, because it said it was 15th Avenue and other. Just wondering what the
Well,
other was.
What I think the other means is, we're gonna do some curbing repair on 16th, and then the county said if we do the curbing repair, they'll come in and pave the whole thing for us, so.
Okay, so
I
it's
think
got
that's
nothing to do
what the
with the
other
remainder
part
of 12th Avenue that still has
Yeah.
to be paved.
That's what the engineer told me, there was some money in there, that we could do that curbing, and then the county's gonna come in, the county's gonna pay for us.
Okay,
We still have 12th Avenue to finish up, if that's your question.
yeah.
Yeah, we still have 12th Avenue to finish up, that's in the process. We tried to get them here before Memorial Day, they could not get here before then, but we're still.
It's still on the books, though?
Yes, sir.
Oh, yeah, that one is.
Thank you. It's been 28 years since.
No, I realize that, we're getting there.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else?
Hi, Brett Lomas, 9th Ave, 609 9th Ave. To go with the Route 71 question, the main street there is where I've mentioned a couple times that there's no cross signals. And part of the reason was because it was the county road. I don't know if this,
No, it's a
it
state road.
sounds like it has nothing to do with it.
The
but I wanted-
state has approved everything. We're just waiting for them to come here and do it.
Okay.
So they haven't given us a timetable when they're going to do it, but it's all been approved for all
Okay.
those signals from 8th all the way to the bridge.
Okay, good, thank you.
Okay, people.
Motion to close the public session?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Can I have a motion to approve the resolutions as listed on the consent agenda?
Second.
Councilman Vaughn? Councilman McCracken?
Yes.
Councilman Carvelli?
Yes.
Mayor Walsifer?
Yes.
Next, can I have a motion to approve resolution 2021-152? This is a revised version of the resolution previously adopted.
I'll make the motion.
Councilman Vaughn? Councilman McCracken?
Yes.
Councilman Carvelli?
Yes.
Mayor Walsifer?
Yes.
So I need a motion to remove ordinance 2021-24 from the consent agenda number 2.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay, so can I have a motion? We're going to amend ordinance 2021-24 to say the end time in section F is 6 p.m. Can I have a motion to offer the amended ordinance for first reading and introduction?
Second.
Okay, Councilwoman Vaughn?
Yes.
Councilman McCracken?
Yes.
Councilman Carvelli?
Yes.
Mayor Walsifer?
Yes.
Okay, and then can I have a motion to approve the remaining ordinances listed on consent agenda number 2? That's ordinance 21, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, and 25, all for first reading and introduction.
Motion.
Okay, Councilwoman Vaughn?
Yes.
Councilmember Kraken?
Yes.
Councilman Carvelli?
Yes.
Mayor Walsifer?
Yes.
Next is second reading and public hearing on ordinance 2021-12. This is an ordinance amending Chapter 35 of flood regulations. It's open for public comment. If anyone would like to speak on this ordinance, please state your name and address.
Yes, Chair.
Gerald Buckle, 409 Fifth Avenue. I need to go back to the consent agenda. There was no opportunity for the public to make any comments on any of the ordinances listed on the consent agenda.
All right, but we're on,
But
bring it up.
you passed. This
We're on-
was just
we're on the-
just skipped.
Respectfully, sir, there didn't have to be an opportunity for public comment on the consent agenda for a first reading of an ordinance.
Well, that leads me to
Only an
my,
opportunity for, there's only a requirement for an opportunity for public comment on the consent agenda that addresses resolutions.
okay, and what's the legal authority for a consent agenda for ordinances?
NJSA 40:49-2.
Can you tell? And that is the procedure that says introduced and having passed at a first reading?
That sounds
But
not
the-
accurate, correct.
But the town has an ordinance, 2.7, that states consent agendas include items of business excluding ordinances shall be included under a single section of the agenda known as the consent agenda.
And then I believe the second necessity thereafter might be the third, talks about how the purpose of that is to address items that are adopted or passed by the borough council.
Yeah,
But when
but-
something is on first reading, it's not being adopted or passed.
But it's
just
still,
introduced.
the exclusion still applies to ordinances.
No,
There's no
it's not.
consent agenda for ordinances.
There is, and it's left into the discretion of the governing body pursuant to 40.
And how was there a first reading of all the ordinances listed in the consent agenda?
Because it was done by consent agreement.
But it says it has to be done either read or, which means first read by title. Neither was done. If the ordinances weren't read and they weren't done by title.
No, that's not what the statute says. The statute actually reads every ordinance after, and the operative word there is after, being introduced and having passed a first reading, comma, which first reading may be by title. Now, when you're interpreting a statute, there are two controlling terms that is basically used by the legislature. The first is the word shall, which indicates a compulsive effect. The second is the word may. Now, when the word is used, as may is used, that indicates that it's actually a permissive function that's designated to the governing body.
But you would agree that the ordinance has to be read, correct?
No, I do not agree, because as it was done through a consent agenda, that was proper.
Well, I think you're kind of on a little thin ice here, because these ordinances that were just passed by consent agenda could ultimately be found not to be permissible, because you haven't had an appropriate first reading.
Now, every ordinance can be found to be non-permissible, but it is our opinion that this was a valid first reading because it was done through consent agenda, and there is nothing in the statute or the borough ordinance which prohibits.
So let's go back to your analysis about the routine and ordinary thing that's in the borough ordinance. Didn't you say that that kind of overwrites the fact that, the ordinance actually says that ordinances should not be done by consent agenda? Isn't the consent agenda to do routine
Now
matters?
I'm on the same page, sorry, had to a few seconds. So, consent agendas, when passing on resolutions, are designed for routine matters. However, we've got two separate legislative functions that we're dealing with. One is the resolution, which, yes, I would agree with you, that can be handled for routine matters. Whereas an ordinance is not a routine matter, which cannot be adopted on only one reading. An ordinance requires a second reading, which is why the opportunity for a public comment and hearing is always provided on the second hearing.
But the consent agenda also requires that the matter, whether it's a resolution or an ordinance, be of a routine and ordinary matter, doesn't it?
No, that's for resolutions. We're dealing with an ordinance, but not.
I don't know what ordinance you're reading, but in the plain language that I read it, it says that ordinances should not be passed by consent agenda.
So
And
when
you have in here an ordinance which is not ordinary in any but you have the ordinance that deals with the cannabis statute. That's not an ordinary ordinance. That's not a routine run-of-the-mill ordinance, is it?
It is a routine run-of-the-mill ordinance because you're just amending the land use ordinance of the borough. I'm not entirely
But this is
certain
a whole
what
new
you're trying to
issue.
make.
Shouldn't the public have the right to have discussion on that?
That's what the opportunity for second hearing is, which would be provided at the next available borough council meeting.
But when you do a consent agenda on resolutions, you're allowed to have a public discussion before the resolutions are voted on, correct?
There's no statutory requirement to mandate a public comment on a consent agenda in authorizing ordinances on first reading.
All right, so let me ask you, on some meetings, we have 5 ordinances that are all read individually, right? And in this meeting, we have, I don't know, I'm just looking at it, 6 or 7 that were put on the consent agenda. What determines whether a consent agenda is done or not?
It's left up to the discretion of the borough council. Now, in this case, it would be timely, it would be efficient. I can think of a number of reasons which would make it warranted. There's no harm or foul in going from a consent agenda, issuing something on first reading, as opposed to reading them each individually, because under both circumstances, there's no requirement that there be public comment. Now, if this was on a second hearing and there was ever an attempt made to prevent the public from making a comment on the ordinance, I would 100% agree with you. But that's not the circumstances.
But there's no reason why this could not have been done individually tonight. But for your decision to do it on a consent agenda.
Well, it wasn't my decision, it's whether or not it was legal and.
You just said borough council. It's
I'm
up
not
to
a
the
member of
borough
the borough
council.
council, though.
Excuse me?
I'm not a member of the borough council, though.
I thought you meant council.
Oh, no, sorry, I had disconnected. So,
When did the borough council decide to put this on a consent agenda?
well, I was inquired by the clerk whether or not it would be permissible, and the legal answer is yes, it is permissible.
Okay, and why is it, does the clerk ask you every time there are 4 or 5 ordinances on there, whether or not it should be done on a consent agenda?
No, it's when there's 4 or 5, it's only 4 or 5, now we're dealing with 7. So due to the vast amount of them, we thought it'd be more efficient, so we got down to the more pressing and important matters at hand, which are the 3 ordinances that are on for second reading.
Even though there are items on here that are not unique that are unique to the.
Well, nobody can comment on them anyway on first reading, correct?
That's correct. There's
Nobody
no
can comment
requirement.
on them on first
So
reading.
then
We're introducing
then we
them.
never need to have a first reading. Then we should always do the ordinances on a consent agenda, correct?
Unfortunately, there's a case that dates back to 1901, which indicates that if a first reading does not occur, then the ordinance would be declared ultra vires. However, by doing it through a consent agenda, you are providing the opportunity for a first reading, so it wouldn't be.
How is this a first reading? Do I not understand the word reading? How does this constitute a first reading?
I'm not certain where you're disconnected, sir, but with all due respect.
Printing an agenda with all of the items on that, how does that constitute a first reading?
Because we're addressing it as a consent agenda. And that is
You're
why.
going around in circles. I think we need to have a private discussion about this, if you don't mind. I'll stay after the meeting,
I'll give you my
and we can talk to it.
I'll give you my.
I'm not going to call you.
Okay.
I would rather talk to you in person.
Sounds like a plan, sir.
Thank you.
No problem.
Anybody else on ordinance 2112?
May I have a motion to close the public hearing? Who's the funding hearing that was?
Sorry.
All in favor?
Aye.
And a motion to adopt ordinance 2021-12.
Motion. Second.
Councilman Wong?
Yes.
Councilman McCracken?
Yes.
Councilman Carvelli?
Yes.
Mayor Walsberg?
Yes.
Okay, next is second reading and public hearing on ordinance 2021-17. This is an ordinance authorizing for acquisition of real property at 414 9th Avenue. It's open for public comment. Please come forward and state your name and address.
Hello, Jim Bean, 612 16th Avenue. This ordinance stinks, it's slimy, it's abuse of power, and it's corrupt. And the idea that, well, let's just say before you guys vote and put the words eminent domain forever attached to you guys, I'd like to suggest an alternative political outcome that maybe will help everyone. If this was brought to a referendum in November, which won't cost a dime, you guys will not have to vote yes on eminent domain. You won't be seizing property from private citizens, and it would actually allow the townspeople to decide whether this is legitimate or not. I understand the reason why the town wants this building, but I don't agree with how you're doing it. So if some of you would vote no, say I would like it to go to referendum come November, then let the townspeople actually decide whether this eminent domain is a good tool that we can use all over the place in Belmar. And but if you vote yes, this will forever be tattooed on your career as a politician, that you supported eminent domain and you took private property. That's all I have, thank you.
Patrick, you want to come out for a moment?
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't catch his name.
Jim.
Sir, I just wanted to just
No,
explain.
I don't want to hear it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, for the rest of the week.
Yeah, we'd like to hear it.
So for the rest of the public and members of the council, this isn't an eminent domain ordinance where it's just going to proceed eminent domain application. What this does is it provides. Can you guys hear me better now?
Yeah.
All right, sorry. So what this ordinance does is it doesn't mean that we're going to issue an eminent domain proceeding right out the gate. What this does is it provides the money to begin negotiating at arm's length. Now, underneath the eminent domain statute, we are required to negotiate at arm's length. And as I mentioned at our previous meeting, it is our intention to resolve this in the most amicable manner possible, because we want to respect the Borough of First Aid's long and endearing history to this town. So as far as that, we're going to immediately initiate eminent domain proceedings. That's far from the case. Our goal is to negotiate until we hit a brick wall, and then there's nothing further. And at that point, we would have to make the decision on whether or not we're going to proceed by filing a declaration of taking. Does anybody else have any questions about that?
No, I think that's.
He said that we're taking private citizens' property, is that accurate?
Private entity.
It's a
Private entity.
Okay, so citizen.
So,
It's still private property.
although it is a private entity, it is a 501c organization.
Right.
So any proceeds that are given to it or are used
Is it publicly owned?
is it publicly owned? It's
Yeah.
owned by
Is it publicly owned?
Oh,
Answer the question.
Is it publicly owned?
Can I answer?
Yes.
Okay, so the answer is no, that is not owned by the Borough of Belmar.
So if
However,
it's not publicly, what is it?
it is owned by a 501c charitable organization.
Which
So
is
it's
a
not owned
private-
by a private person, because it can't be used for private.
The word person. I don't argue. It's private. It's not public.
I understand your point, sir.
Thank you.
Sure, come on up.
Hi, Sherry Russo, 1218 Briarwood Road. I wanted to ask for, sorry, I was late today. There was a lost dog, and I'm a block captain, so that made me late. I don't like to be late to meetings. I don't like to think I was squinching out. My problem with this is, I think that I read that there was like fees. I couldn't find like what the fees were. I remember when I originally asked about this, once again, that we had all the money. We don't really have all the money. Now we're making this huge bond, when originally we could have done this very easily for much less money. And I just wanted to say once again that I think this is a horrific situation where, you know, for $70,000, for $100,000, we could have spent $500,000 to save First Aid, and we would have saved $1 million. That's a lot of money to me, and I'm sure to a lot of the average citizens who live in Belmar. Now we're bonding this out, which means we need to put a down payment on it, which that's more money to come up with all these fees that we have. And it seems like, you know, there were all these problems with the past administration about how much money they spent. And yet here we are spending so much money, and there's no Hurricane Sandy that rolled through our doors on this administration. I think that is a huge amount of money to spend. I think the fees are huge. I think at last council meeting when I asked about what our bond rating is, and nobody even knows what it is, on how we're getting a loan and what our interest rates. And I think that we're putting like the cart before the horse here. And, you know, we don't know what our rates are gonna be, let's just do it anyways. You know, we don't care about how much money we could have saved, let's just do it anyways. I think that is a bad situation, and I think that eminent domain is even a worse thing to do. Like, here we are, we're trying to take something when we should have negotiated this out for a small amount of money originally. And I'm sure plenty of people in town think this is also a horrific situation, and I just wanted to say my piece. Thank you.
Anyone else? Mike?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Mike Seebeck, 110 Second Avenue. Mayor Walsper, I hope that patch you're sporting is something routine.
No surgery.
The only thing I can be grateful of is the fact that the last time I got my hair cut wasn't by Trina, so it's probably better that you're only looking at me through one eye. It's been a while since I've seen you all. I hope everybody's very well. And I had some questions regarding the 17 ordinance also. Because I found the path to where we are today a little convoluted, so I'm just going to try to get some clarity. Did not the borough either issue a bond ordinance or an intent to a bond for $1.5 million originally, when I guess the negotiations started breaking down between the borough and the first aid squad?
I think a bond was passed, wasn't Pat?
I believe, are you talking about from back a few years ago, or are you talking about the one from last session?
Yeah, we
I don't
adopted
think
a
it was
bond
last
ordinance.
session.
No, we adopted a bond
No,
for 1.5 because we had to make a bid on the building.
Yeah, that was only on first reading, so.
So we actually went through a financial expenditure to issue a bond ordinance for $1.5 million for the intended acquisition of this building for said purpose of continuance of first aid in the town. Is there any reason we didn't bid $1.5 million? Because I think that's what's really created a situation I'm having trouble understanding.
Well, as a town, we had to go out and we had to get an appraisal on it, and the appraisal come in less than that. So that's what we had to bid on, the appraised amount. So then when there was another bidder that came in higher, we agreed to pay the higher price. So I think that building's important. I think it's important for public safety. You know, there's been a lot of different allegations against us for not doing this or not. Once the letter came to us that they were closing the doors, our main concern is having a viable first aid and public safety. Now, you know, we can get blamed for a lot of things. We were in negotiations. We were doing all that. And
Well,
this is the part where we're at right now. So,
and I'm not saying that's not the case, but was there any discussion of use of eminent domain on or around the time that the town went to bond? In other words, were the mayor and council putting in a plan B in effect that if they were not effective through that path, that they would have this as a secondary path of acquisition?
we were in negotiations, and then everybody was in agreement with the amount of money, and in the 11th hour, there was something put on the deed restrictions that we cannot accept.
Well, nobody in this room is privy to that, Mayor Walsper, so I understand that. That's why I'm just wondering how that went, in the sense that, you know, we went through the expense of a bond ordinance, and yet we were contemplating eminent domain, you know, that kind of is...
No, we only contemplated it when the deed restrictions came into play. But this continues negotiations. This ordinance continues negotiations. We don't want to take it. We don't want to go that route. But it'll let us continue negotiations to get that building. Because I think that building's that important to Belmar.
That is evident by the extent that you're willing to go to that length to get the building. But I guess the issue I have is, why didn't we bid to win when we had the opportunity and forego all of this.
Well, I just explained it to you because we had an appraisal that we had to stand by.
But,
We had an
but
appraisal.
truthfully, people go out and I don't think that any property in this town is selling for what it's appraised at these days. I mean,
The problem is
I'm not
we're
a
a
realtor.
municipality, so we can only bid on what it was appraised for. And then, after we lost the bid, then we can negotiate.
But hold on a second, there's actually a restriction that the borough is not allowed to bid for more than a property's appraised value?
Well, we didn't know what the bids were gonna come in. So now when the bids came in higher, that set a new price for the property. So, and we agreed to pay that price.
But that's an arm's length transaction. Again, the question I had was, is there anything about the appraisal value that would restrict the borough from bidding higher?
Sir, if I may, I just want to kind of look at this whole thing in hindsight.
Sure.
Say hypothetically, we set a bid for 1.5 million right out the gate. Well, then this property gets appraised and it comes out that, well, the property wasn't worth 1.5 million, it was only worth 1.1 million. So now the borough is being charged with wasting essentially $400,000 and overpaying for a piece of property. So you have to weigh it on both sides of the scale. Where I see the point you're making. However, when you're in charge of taxpayer funds, when you're in charge of a borough, you have to make everything with sound discretion, not always with what you think you should pay, and you have to rely on a professional, which in this case was an appraiser.
I understand your point, but the fact of the matter is now we've gone out, we've encouraged a public bid. We lost the bid, and now through eminent domain, we're usurping the whole process of a public bid in an arm's length transaction.
Well, the winning bidder actually withdrew his bid, which then made us the winning bidder, and then they denied, they rejected our bid thereafter.
I just, you know, if we're gonna use eminent domain on a property like that because we covered the property, I think that should be the process right out of the gate, rather than going out and spending the money for a bond ordinance to a bid for a property and then not bid what we raised the money to bid for. You know, it's just, it creates an environment where you have to wonder if the process is fair to all of the parties involved, if you're gonna go out and do that. And I know negotiations are difficult. I mean, I happen to think, you know, also, it's disappointing we couldn't perpetuate what we had at a lower number, because if you take $70,000 and you know, divide it by 1.5 million, it's a lot of years into the future it would have carried us. I'm not
Mike, we went out to
negotiations,
bid.
Mark.
They had every right to bid and come up with whatever money they needed. They decided not to. They decided to close the doors, and we have to worry about the public safety of this town. So that's where we're at.
Mark, unfortunately, the limited amount of information the public has is what's reported, okay?
We put everything up on the website, every letter, everything, for everybody to read, to see what goes on.
Honestly, that's what I'd love to see. I mean,
It's all up there. Every letter back and forth.
I went to visit an old friend of
attorneys.
yours, David Schneck, and he showed me a book of Hampton, New Hampshire. It's been published continuously for 382 years, but every document that happens in the town is bound and supplemented to every resident of the town as a complete volume. And, you know, echoing what Jerry says, even as so much as the readings, all I'm saying is that when the town makes overtures to do one thing, it goes a different way, and then you have the eminent domain. It just doesn't look as if it's kind of fair dealing, and I'm just questioning why we didn't go after the property with the vigor that we kind of intended when we raised the amount of money. Because I don't think the $1.5 million that you guys
Well, I was
discussed.
hoping that they would have negotiated with us first, but that wasn't the case. So they put it out for bid.
But a bid's a bid. And if we bid the 1.5, we win the property, it's over. It's just, this whole conversation is.
They changed the terms after.
I don't know what terms would change. I know that the bid is a number, and high bid wins, and we weren't high bid.
When they were gonna sell it to a developer, there were no restrictions on the deed. When the developer went through.
That's not true. That's not true.
Is that not true?
It was no deed
There was
restrictions.
no
No,
deed
I would have forbid there was no deed restrictions.
Now there are deed restrictions.
Now there are deed restrictions for the borough.
Now that the buyer changed.
Well, but hold on a second. Respectfully, I can almost see why maybe that's the case, because when I saw that, according to newspaper articles, I apologize, I have not been to every meeting and on every Zoom call, so if there's a couple of gaps in my understanding of what's going on, I saw the borough wanted the property, raised the money to buy the property. The property went out to bid, the bid was awarded, we weren't the high bidder in terms of the borough. The next article was the borough is going to use eminent domain.
You missed an article.
I must have.
You must want to.
All right, so, but there was no discussions of the use of eminent domain prior to this? I mean, prior to the bond, like, all we're going back to the bond? If you thought about that.
With prior discussions, I mean, we're still in negotiations. Even with this ordinance, it's still in negotiation. This ordinance gives the borough some protections. So that there's a lot of different protections it gives us. But we're still in negotiations, even though this is getting passed tonight, or if the council passes it tonight. We are still, and that's the whole process. I mean, Patrick will tell you, we have to go through a whole process of still negotiation before you get to that.
But eminent domain is a different type of circumstances to negotiate on.
I mean, we're not taking it for free.
I believe me, I'm not saying that. I understand this price of everything. It just seemed to me that when the borough went through the process of raising the money, spending the money to do a bond ordinance, you know, we should bid the property to win the property and be over with in an arm's length transaction, and this would have been over. And now, to have bidders withdrawing, and it just taints the environment of going forward, any transaction like
We
this.
all up here have to listen to our professionals, and that's what they explain.
But you guys make the decisions, the professionals.
If an appraiser
can
comes
tell you
in-
the property was worth $50,000.
Okay.
Respectfully,
we don't know.
Are you gonna listen to that?
Well, that's what we put the bid in. We didn't know. So the next bidder that came in
Again,
set the
let me-
appraised price. That said it.
Have properties in Belmar been selling at the appraised price?
If somebody else bid at $2 million, we'd be looking at $2 million. Maybe at that price, we wouldn't be looking at it. I don't know.
Well, in terms of fiduciary responsibility to taxpayers, let it go. I mean, you're right, but you guys set a bar. You set the 1.5 million. And
All right, we can beat this up all the time, but I'm telling you, we listened to the attorneys and we listened to our financial people and said that's what we had to bid. That's what the appraisal come in, that's what we had to bid. And that's who we listened to. We just make it, say, oh, we'll throw that out the window, we don't listen to our professionals. I'm like, I don't know where you're going with this, Mike.
Where I'm going with the market, it
There's
just
just a
seems.
misunderstanding about this, there's a big misunderstanding about this eminent domain. We were the successful bidder for the property.
Excuse me?
The borough was the successful bidder for that property.
By what measure? I was just curious.
I'm sorry?
By what measure?
Oh.
Because the other bidder withdrew, is that
That's correct.
the measure?
So we were the successful.
So then, honestly, we should be buying the property for 1.1 million or whatever you guys bid, right?
No, because now the appraised is what the other bid was. So that raises the bar that we could go to that, because now that set the price for what the property was worth.
Which is a fair market value, which is what we're offering to pay the Belmar First Aid Squad, even though, in my opinion, the Belmar First Aid Squad should be donating that building to the taxpayer. We have for 100 years been supporting the Belmar First Aid Squad, writing checks out of our personal checking accounts annually to offset their operating costs. Yes, they have some debt on the building, but why did, I don't want to speak for them because I don't know their reasoning, but I have that question as to if they want the building to remain as a public use, if their priority is the safety of the citizens of Belmar, which is our responsibility here as a governing body, why are they not being more charitable with their resources in looking at how they can work with the borough to continue their operation, to continue their tradition, and continue the legacy that they have established in town? For some reason, they decided not to do that. And here we are in a borough, time and time again, offering, I think there's a misunderstanding that people think eminent domain is we're getting it for free. Not getting it for free. You're still paying fair market value for that property, which was elevated from an appraisal that we got from another bidder who ultimately decided to withdraw his bid. I'm assuming because he saw the importance that that building remained as a public safety building for the citizens of this town. So I wish we could have the Belmar First Aid Squad come in here, but you know, their attorneys advise them not to talk with us only through attorneys or, you know, the negotiations.
Yeah, I get all that, but I was just wondering, were you party to the negotiations directly, Councilman Kraken?
I am not on the negotiating team now.
Okay, could I maybe get a show of hands who was on the negotiating team representing the mayor and council with the first aid squad?
Because I don't know what you mean by negotiating team. It's the professionals that are doing it, and we give them guidance. I mean, like, I'm not sitting on that. I mean, it's the attorneys that get together.
Okay, but you guys ultimately make the decision. So let's say they...
Yeah, we made the decision to say, okay, we still want the building, so...
But even before that, go back, just humor me for a moment. If we went back further and said, you know, what were they looking for in terms of additional funding and stuff like that? And Councilman Kraken, you're right. I know we've been supporting them a long time, and they provided service for a long time. And it seems to me that is kind of consistent with a lot of other first aid squads in various towns around us. Ours being a little bit more long-lived than theirs. The first aid squad went back quite a bit. So this is why when
Are we talking about going back to 70,000?
Yeah.
Well, first, Mike, you know, we have a budget to it here too. It wasn't budgeted for. Last year, we had a lot of different problems that we had to pay a lot of different things for them, that their business model really wasn't working. So we didn't really want to see their books. All we wanted to do was take a look to see where the problems were so that we could budget correctly to keep them going. In the process of doing all that, we got a letter that says they're closing up April 1st. We called up and said, this is crazy. What are you guys doing? And they said, that's it. We don't want to know nothing. We're closing up April 1st. So what would you expect us to do? We need a proper first aid in Belmar for public safety. And now...
But I guess,
so if this is all water under the bridge...
But I'm struggling to understand how that happens in a vacuum. In other words, they say, well, we need an additional 70,000, and the borough says, okay, and then they send us a letter, we're closing down, and the borough says, no, we're not, and then they send a letter saying we're closing.
We have a whole staff to deal with personnel, so I said, maybe it's not all about money. We could do all your personnel that has to get paid, we have a whole staff to do that. We are all computerized, everything. So we could have did that, we could have took that from them. We could have did a lot of different things instead of just throwing money that we had not budgeted for. And you gotta know, you know, you can't just, where are we gonna get the money? Bond another 70,000 just to give it to them? No. The problem was that if it was equipment or the billing of everybody's insurance or wherever the problems were, that's what we wanted to look at. They come out and said, oh, they want to see our books. No, it wasn't the books. It was the way they were operating their business model. I mean, we could have took all their employees in here, did all their payroll for them, saved them money like the year before. We took on their insurance. They were paying like $65,000 for insurance. They couldn't pay it. So we brought it underneath the umbrella of the borough to take that burden off of them the year before. So when they came to us and said, listen, we need another 70,000, I said, we got to take a look at the way you're running your business model, because now it's not volunteer, it's a paid first aid squad. That's where we were. And when we got the letter, it said, we're closing up. And that's where we were. So now we have to get into, and that was what, 6 months ago? We had April 1st, we had to get a first aid squad in. We went out to bids, we didn't like how all the bids were coming in. We figured this is the easiest way and the best way we can provide public safety to Belmar is taking that on, creating our own first aid squad. And when they were gonna sell the building off, that's when we took a look at it and said, is this building still worth keeping it for the public safety of Belmar? And with the employees we have during the summertime, All my years as a police officer, we did a lot of training up in that building, a lot of training. When we had, back in the 90s, when we had the riots, that building was a staging area for us. It houses the water rescue. Lifeguards do a lot down there. I mean, there's a lot of first aid members here tonight. They know how many things that happened out of that building, and we feel that it's that important to us for public safety. So we only dealt with the cards we had in front of us, and our main concern up here is when somebody calls for first aid, that first aid rig is going to be there, and that's our main concern.
Believe me, I understand that. It just seems to me now, we're going to
I mean, we're going back and rehashing the whole thing, but that ship has sailed. I mean, we're at the point now, what are the decisions we're making?
With all due respect, Mark, this is the only way you get to measure how your elected officials are making decisions and stuff, is based on what their decisions are and the facts. And quite honestly, to Sherry's point about, now it's steamrolling into a couple of $1 million between equipment, payroll, and, now that taxpayers, after the ship is sailed, is finding out how much the ship is costing to sail. And, this is the transparency we're looking for. That's why I asked about, the eminent domain. If it was there in the beginning, we didn't use it, then the whole spending the money for a bond ordinance was just, it just potentially unnecessary. I don't know. I just question these decisions because it looks to me as if...
We can go back and forth all night, but, okay, that's what you perceive the whole thing as, but we don't, so... It was a process. We had to go out for the 1.5. Because we had to spend $250,000 to come up with, to put the bid in, and we didn't know what the bid was going to be until the appraisal come back. So we can go back.
So if we lost the bid, we'd be out 250 grand.
No.
Is that?
No, you get the 250 grand back if you lost the bid.
Is that how it works? Okay. Okay. Listen, the more transparency you guys can provide, better. It's the only way we can evaluate how things are being done. And I know how important first aid is. It seems to me like we're all getting a bunch of facts and figures that are perhaps not in line with what the expectations were when this whole process started. And in hindsight, maybe it would have been easier to have negotiated differently at the $70,000 mark. That's the reality.
Believe me, we tried.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks.
Have a great night.
I actually have a question. When we pass a bond ordinance to spend $1.5 million, are we going out and getting that money right away? Or are we waiting to see if... I didn't think so. Yeah, so it's not like we spend any money to pass that ordinance.
No, that's correct.
Right, okay. Because there's temporary bonding anyway, in advance of the permanent. Yeah.
That's correct.
Thank you very much.
Brett Lomas, 609 9th Ave. I'll be real quick. I just want to clarify, because a few minutes ago you guys had mentioned that there were no, the deed restrictions were right out of the blue, after we had already won the bid. But, it was reported that as, and I'll read the article. It says, as part of the bid requirements, all bidders were required to submit certification that they would not seek to expand the existing non-conforming use of the property or to develop the property for uses other than single-family residential homes. So, what were the deed restrictions other than on top of those that are a problem for the borough?
Approvals. You would have to come to the borough and get subdivision approvals and go through the process to get to that point.
No, I guess my question is, what deed restrictions were added that are an issue for the borough?
That we can never change anything on there. We can't expand the parking lot by 2 inches. We can't do anything else with that building. Anyone else? Yes, Mark.
Mark Levis, 904 13th Avenue. It's hard to swallow because the things we're hearing coming from the people at the first aid squad are a lot different than the story that you guys are telling us. And it almost seems like this was the plan from the beginning, to strong-arm them into giving you the building, or they're going to have no other choice but to pack up shop. we were getting a pretty good deal for $70,000, I think, to have first aid service. And to say that we have to use eminent domain in this situation just stinks. Take the eminent domain part out of the ordinance, negotiate with them, pay the money that the value of the property is worth, but don't force their hand.
Well, excuse me.
Don't take something from them.
So we are negotiating. So step one, as I mentioned earlier, is that
I
we have to negotiate at arm's length. So
I understand
our goal is
that.
to never have to use eminent domain.
Then take it out of the ordinance.
No, because this is required of the Eminent Domain Act, that it has to be, step one, permission
Not
to
if you never
negotiate
intend
at
to
arm's
use it.
length. I'm sorry?
Not if you never intend to use eminent domain, take it out of the ordinance. Say you're not going to use eminent domain and negotiate with them.
It's better to have ourselves protected and have the power to use it if we don't need it, than
It
rather
sounds
need it and not
like
have
you're
it.
getting ready to use it. Otherwise, it
Not
won't be in the
our intention right
ordinance.
now.
Take it
This
out.
is the requirement.
I think you should take it out. This stinks. It's disgusting. You guys should be ashamed of
We
yourselves.
got it.
Jerry Buckafusco, 409 Fifth Avenue. I think we actually agreed on something in terms of this ordinance. I agree with you. This ordinance just gives the borough the authority to purchase the property, correct?
That's correct, and I think it's a miracle.
Right. So the thing I'm worried about, though, is the next step. The eminent domain process. It's not clear how that goes. I know Title 20 deals with all the stuff that goes on, after the process begins. But I would like to see the council, if it decides to go that way, put it up to a vote that they're going to decide that they should go to eminent domain. And I'm not sure that that's a requirement, but what I want to avoid is someone deciding that the council, the town, the borough is going to go to eminent domain without the council's approval.
There's no statutory prohibition on it. We would need the council's approval to continue proceeding from after, if negotiation fails, to move forward with eminent domain. So as far as if you guys wanted to caucus it at a session, that would be entirely left to your discretion.
So, but I mean, would it come to a vote that the members of the public would know that the council, we can see who on the council is voting for the move towards eminent domain and who is voting not to go towards eminent domain? That would be my hope, that there would be that kind of transparency so that everyone could see, the decision that's being made and who's making that decision. But I couldn't see anything that required that, and that's why I'm asking that that be, done by the council.
Well, you are correct. There's nothing that requires it, so it's entirely left up to the borough council.
Right.
It's their decision. It's not required by law. It's not required by the Eminent Domain Act. So at the end of the day, it would be something that would be purely left to their.
I mean, I don't want to read in the Coast-Star that, tomorrow morning, it was decided that they were going to go to eminent domain, and the case was filed in Monmouth, Superior Court to begin the condemnation proceedings. That's what I'm saying to the council. I think you have an obligation to us that if that decision needs to be made, that it be done in public. Right? I don't want to see or hear about, a filing that's already been done at the county without any public input. Because then the next step would be that, as someone else said, then at that point, it really should go to a referendum. I don't know that everyone in the town is decided one way or the other. I'm not taking a position one way or the other. My position is simply, before you make a decision, I would let the people make that decision for you. And it's a win-win. It gets you off the hook, and it allows the public to have input into the process of whether or not, eminent domain takes place. All right, so those are my comments. Like I said, I have no, I'm not going either way on it, but I strongly suggest that you either decide to take a vote on it, or before you do that, get it out to the public somehow. A referendum would be the ideal way to do it. Let the people vote. We have members of the community on both sides saying we should, we shouldn't. And I think that would be the best way to proceed in this case. It would give you full transparency. And I'm just going to add one other thing to that. I think the better practice actually would have been to have an ad hoc committee come together and figure out where the best spot for a first aid squad would be. And kind of think out of the box a little bit and not, focus on the first aid property. There's probably property, and I don't know all the town property, but, it's inconceivable to me that there's not a piece of property that's being underutilized or can be redone in a way to put the first aid squad, in a more commercial area. I mean, right now it's in the residential area. It would be nice to have 3 homes built on that property. But again, it's not my decision. I think you should leave it up to the people. Let them, do it on a referendum and
So I don't think
get
we'd be able to
yourself
build
built
that
up.
building for 1.5.
What's that?
You're suggesting we find another location and build a first aid building.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think a first aid building like that's there.
I don't know, I'm not an
Costs
expert.
1.5.
I'm not an expert on how much it costs to build things, but, there's rumors around that it's going to be, would be expanded, wouldn't be expanded, so, I don't think we're at that point where we would, I think the ad hoc committee would have to investigate that and see really what is the cost, Especially if there were, it might be an opportunity to consolidate some other services in the town. And it might be a better investment in the long run to spend more and put it in an area where it could be better utilized.
And where would that be?
I'm sorry, I'm not an expert.
Well, you know the town, where would it be?
No, I'm not going to put me on the spot for that. I haven't done the research. Put me in charge of a committee. I'll let you know in a month or two where we should put it. Would you do that? Mr. Kirschenbaum, would you do that? Would you put me in charge of a committee?
You gotta talk to the mayor.
I'm willing to do it for free. No problem. I'll come back in 2 months and we'll look at all the property and we'll tell you.
You do
maybe
realize
where it
all
should be.
emergency services are in residential areas, you understand?
No, you asked me if I knew
No,
where.
I'm asking you a question. Do you understand that all of our emergency services, all of our firehouses and our first aid homes?
Well, I'm not talking about what is. I'm talking about what could be. That's what I'm talking about. All right? Like I said, I made the offer. You know my number. Give me a call. Thanks.
Anyone else?
So there's
Yes.
can you just comment on the deed restrictions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, please.
So,
Patrick, can't hear you.
can you guys hear me better now?
Yes.
Sorry about that. So, with the whole deed restrictions, or do you want me to comment on deed restrictions that were being sought to be
Well,
imposed, or?
I'm sorry. It sounds like there's a discrepancy between what people are coming to the microphone saying and what I know to be the issue with the deed restrictions. So where did they come along and what's the current issue with them right now?
So,
And Patrick, if I may.
I'm sorry.
Like the mayor said, once that bid was withdrawn, the borough made the offer of the same bid for the amount of money that the bid that was withdrawn for fair market value.
That's right.
Once the first aid found out that we were there and would automatically pay that, they, and their whole member, I can't speak for their members, I do know that their members were advised that to accept the offer. Once they heard that it was going to go through, then further deed restrictions were placed on contingent on the borough.
That's correct, and that actually was in a letter dated June 2nd.
Which actually, I don't understand why the first aid squad, being a 501(c), would not want to work with the borough now to get their first aid squad back into that public safety complex, to be utilized for the residents of Belmar and their visitors. So, let me just, I'm sorry.
Well, that baffled us throughout this entire negotiation tactic.
Right, exactly right.
The process where we attempted to assist them, we were bending over backwards, and we were getting rejected at every corner.
At every corner.
And then it got to the point where we sat there and we said, we're honestly shocked that you don't want to work with us and that you just want to close down shop. And we received a letter that indicated that it was a almost unanimous decision to dissolve the Belmar First Aid Squad and that they appreciated serving the borough and its citizens. So from there, then they indicated that they were going to be selling the property and that they were going to be putting it out for a public bid, so we did place our bid. In that bid, there was a clause that indicated that they had the right to reject all bids, which is just a standard clause for all bidding procedure. Thereafter, there was a higher bid, who ultimately withdrew, and we as the borough offered to match their bid to purchase the property. From there, further negotiations proceeded, and then on June 7th, we received the letter from the Borough First Aid Squad's attorney, which indicated they were adding 4 new essential deed restrictions, 2 dealing with a plaque and a sign that would be donated to the Historical Society, which it's a historic building. We had absolutely no problem with that. The issue with it was, though, the impervious coverage and the parking not being permitted to ever expand that for any reason whatsoever, and secondary for the size of the building. Now, we don't know in the future, hypothetically, look at it this way. Say you need a larger garage bay to accommodate a larger apparatus, because as technology proceeds, so now you have to adjust the building height in order to accommodate said apparatus. With this deed restriction, you cannot do that. You would be prohibited. So they would essentially be tying the borough's tide and impeding their ability to essentially protect the future inhabitants of the borough, which is one of the main concern of every council that they're faced with when they're looking to spend money.
So it would be wrong to agree to deed restrictions when we, 10 years or 20 years from now, we would not be able to do anything for public safety for the town of Belmar.
Yes, with that possibility, it would be outrageous to agree to the deed restriction, because they don't serve any public purpose. They were unilaterally imposed with an unjustifiable restriction.
Only after they learned that the town was going to be the purchaser.
Correct, on June 7th.
Do you have something, Brett?
Yeah, because the article that I read from was from May 28th. That's what I'm confused
So there
about.
were deed restrictions, but there were additional deed restrictions.
Because this one says that the winning bid agrees to not expand existing non-conforming use or develop it for other than single-family house. So maybe I'm not reading it wrong, but it seems like if you have already agreed to not expand the use, then what's the problem?
So somebody could have came in and bought that building and left it just exactly as it is and ran their business out of there. They didn't have to take the building down when they were buying it. With that restriction said that if they decide to take it down and subdivide the property, they have to put 3 single-family homes there. But you could have bought it and been grandfathered in to use that building whatever way you want.
Right, as long as I didn't expand it, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, well, it would have been up to the borough to come to a planning board, just like anybody else.
But so why,
But the deed restrictions that are on there now, you couldn't even come to a planning board, you couldn't get any kind of adjustment or any kind of relief, anything that you wanted to do there.
Okay, all right. I misunderstood this.
Yes?
Thanks, Pat.
Hi, Maria Rontanaro, 1246 Pine Tree Way, and my associate Adriana. I just want to ask you to please listen to the residents. We're telling you, do not do eminent domain. Don't do it. Don't go there. We don't want that. And you're saying we don't want that either, but the truth is, then take it off the table. Take it off. Show some goodwill. And I don't appreciate the sentiment that the first aid hasn't been charitable enough to us. I don't appreciate that at all. I feel like we need to be asking the residents, what do they want? If they really are open to acquiring through eminent domain, then let us vote on that. Give us that say, because that's a huge thing to just acquire a building like that. And I certainly wouldn't want my property acquired that way. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, April?
Can I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
And a motion to adopt ordinance 2021-17.
Motion.
Councilman Wong? Yes. Councilman McCracken?
I'm going to make a couple comments. So a lot of folks have accused us tonight of making political decisions here. I'm not going to sit up on this dais and make a political decision regarding this matter. That's not what we were elected by the people to do. We're elected to be up here and make tough decisions. Sometimes people are going to disagree with us on those tough decisions. But those tough decisions always have to be made for the benefits of the borough, for the benefit of the borough of Belmar residents. Do we all wish that these negotiations were not at this point? Absolutely. But we are in a situation here where we have got to move forward so that we can protect the public adequately who live in this town. If I was going to make a political decision, Jim Bean's probably right. I wouldn't vote for this, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to make a decision that's right for Belmar so that we can ensure our residents of all ages have adequate public safety resources. That is what we are elected to do. And when decisions like this are difficult and unpopular, they become political issues. And I expect that in the upcoming campaign, there are going to be political issues. That was demonstrated here by the chair of the Democratic Party, former council person, former candidates, and others. And that's okay. We've got to communicate, I agree, effectively as to why we're doing this, and we're tied. Our strings are tied as a council, because when you have legal issues, you always can't disclose all of the legal facts and nuances of a negotiation to the public. But I think our attorney did a fantastic job here this evening, explaining everything. Every piece of public document is posted on the borough's website. These are actions that haven't been taken in the past, and you know, we have to move forward in protecting the public, and we have to support the legacy of the Belmar First Aid Squad, and we have to make sure that the 100 years of fantastic work that they did protecting our residents continues. So with that, and I hope it never gets to eminent domain, I'm voting for these negotiations to continue this evening so that we can do what we are elected to do, and that's protect the people who live in this borough. So I'm going to vote yes.
Councilman Carvelli?
Yes.
Mayor Walsifer?
Yes.
Okay, next is second reading and public hearing on ordinance 2021-18. This is an ordinance amending housing and property maintenance regarding the planting or growing of bamboo. It's open for public comment. If you want to speak on the ordinance, please step up, state your name and address.
Did we get this in sync with Lake Como?
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly. Okay. Anybody want to speak on this? All right.
Okay, a motion to close the public hearing?
Motion.
Second. Okay, and a motion to adopt ordinance 2021-18.
Motion.
Councilman Juan? Councilman McCracken?
Yes.
Councilman Carvelli?
Yes.
Mayor Walsifer?
Yes. All right, on the public session. Anybody want to come up and speak on behalf of the public, or, yeah, Jerry, come on up.
Jerry Fusto, 409 Fifth Avenue. Councilman McCracken, the comments that you just made really offended me. I am not here as a candidate. Other people who got up are not speaking as ex-candidates or chair of a party. You know me, I think, as well as anyone. I would be here, standing here, if I was running or not. Okay, and for you to come out and make those assertions as to why we're standing up here, I think is ridiculous, really.
I'm sorry you feel that way, Jerry, but
I feel that way.
You make a habit of coming to these meetings and attacking us.
No, I make a habit of coming here and trying to get you to be more transparent. Because you're not doing the job that you should be doing.
This is the most transparent administration I have seen in this borough in 25 years.
Yeah, okay.
So I know you disagree with that, and I understand that. That's okay.
Well, then your idea of transparency and my idea of transparency are totally different.
Can we improve? Can we do better? Of course we can. What I was saying was, I wasn't accusing anybody. All I was saying is difficult issues are going to come.
No, what you were saying were people are standing here.
Jerry.
Go ahead, finish. They're my comments, but go ahead, finish.
Let's work together.
All right.
we need to provide a good public safety system for our residents here in this town. I'm offended that it is potentially becoming a political issue, because it shouldn't. Now, I realize it might not be a party line issue, but it's going to become a political issue. That's what happens when you have issues like this. People are going to take sides, people are going to have their opinions. We need to come together as a community, not constantly be bucking each other, criticizing each other, and making accusations about people on this dais that are absolutely untrue. We sit here every meeting, whether it's virtual or in person, we have to, you know, that's our job. We signed up for this. But, you know, for people who are truly sitting up here, volunteering their own time to try to do right for town, I don't have a problem if people disagree with me. I have a problem when people accuse me of things. And that is what happens time and time again. It's got to end.
Well, that's
And
part
not
of the
continue
job.
like that.
That's part of the job, unfortunately, as you know. But, you know, again, everybody who's standing up here is standing up here as a resident of the borough, okay? And we're all thinking about the best interest of the borough. And I gave you the perfect example, and a few other people have. This doesn't have to be a political decision. Leave it up to the people, put it out for a referendum, get the vote, and then you can decide, and then you will be doing what the majority of the people would like you to do.
Yeah, I don't disagree. There are certain things that absolutely are appropriate for a referendum, but I also believe that people elected us to make informed decisions, balanced decisions, and tough decisions, and that's also part of the job. So part of the job isn't trying to skirt those positions and kick them back to everybody else.
Well, I don't think putting this
because we're not willing to stand up here or sit up here and make those difficult decisions.
Well, I think it would show much more strength if you say, you know what, we will let the people decide what to do in this instance. That's, I think, is a real signal of strength.
It may come to that, and it may come to that.
That's my suggestion.
It may
And
very
I think
well
we'll all
come
be
to
better
that.
for it.
May very well come to that.
Yep.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Gina Greer. I live at 1809 B Street, and I am on the Lake Como side. I felt that I needed to disclose that today. I'm here because of two incidents that happened this weekend that caused me to have concern regarding how our visitors perceive us and their respect or lack of for us as residents of this community. The first incident was on Saturday. I was out walking my dog and I was on 15 and Surf, and somebody pulled up. I was on the corner with another dog owner talking, and somebody pulled up and parked in the yellow zone. We've talked a lot about safety tonight, and from my perception, the yellow zones in the park, in the streets, are for safety purposes. It's to allow emergency vehicles the ability to turn. This gentleman parked in that spot and grabbed his overnight bag. He was heading over to a rental, and his buddy said, "Wait, I don't think you're able to park there." And his comment was, "It doesn't matter. The worst that's gonna happen this weekend is they'll give me a $40 ticket if they even do that." That bothered me, and I would have left it at that, except for a second incident that happened yesterday. So my first question regarding the first incident is, what is the protocol? Because I've gotten lots of different answers when I've asked people regarding when people park in the yellow zone. Are we aggressively, from a safety perspective, monitoring when that's happening, ticketing it, and towing, especially when somebody and our visitors, our rental visitors, look at it as their parking spot for the weekend? So that's my first question on the first incident, and then I'll move to the second.
Well, the first thing is, you know, a lot of people have cell phones. I'm not sure if you do or not, but, you know, the police department, when we have a big influx of visitors, are pretty busy. And we need the residents to call in and say, hey, there's a car legally parked here. The police officer will come down and make that determination if it's going to be towed or ticketed based on the severity of violation and public safety. So if they think it's too close to the corner or underneath the stop sign or it's going to cause a problem, we tow a lot of cars. But they're not everywhere at all times. So, you know, if you see something like that, you know, it really helps us if you would call the police department and get somebody down there.
So that brings me to my second incident, which is why I was concerned about public perception. The second incident actually happened to me personally. I was out volunteering yesterday. I came home from volunteering, and there was a car that was blocking my driveway. I had nowhere else actually to park, other than the paid-for parking that's along Lake Como. So I drove to the police station to ask and inquire what's the process, because someone is now blocking my driveway. I talked to someone over an intercom. In retrospect, it's been advised to me I probably should have called dispatch, because then it would have been recorded and I might have gotten a better answer. But the person that I talked to discouraged me from a couple of standpoints. One, I was told that I needed to call a tow company and have, yeah, I was responsible for calling a tow company if the person, and this might have been a grammatical thing, because I said the person's parked their car, their tire is over the white line, they're 1 to 2 feet in my driveway. And the person said, well, if they're in your driveway, you have to call the tow company and make arrangements for that. And I said, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense to me. Shouldn't the police department take care of this? And the person said no. So I said, well, do you guys have recommendations of who to call? And they said, no, we can't give you recommendations. Now, I don't know tow companies. So then I said, can you guys at least come down and ticket? And I got the impression he really didn't want to be bothered with us, but I was persistent. And so by the time the cops came to ticket and I had just gotten home, the surfers had pulled out. My next door neighbor saw them and actually said something as they were pulling out, saying, you know, you guys were blocking someone's driveway. And they were like, well, it doesn't matter because we do this all the time and nobody ever does anything. So what bothered me was that there was a situation where renters are, as well as surfers. And these guys are here all the time. So Mayor, I understand if I take the responsibility and I make the phone call, but my second question is, if they're blocking my driveway, who's responsible for that?
I don't know where the disconnect was. If somebody's pulled all the way up in your driveway, yeah, then it's your responsibility. You have to sign the summons and call a tow truck. But if it's on the street blocking your driveway, every one of them gets towed. So I don't know where the disconnect was. We'll talk to the chief. Chief had to run to another meeting, but we'll discuss the situation with her.
Okay, and I'll commit to letting you guys know when I walk my dog and see people parking in the yellow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you been in touch with your block captain?
I have.
Claire?
I have.
Is it Claire?
Yeah. And Claire said that tonight's the meeting, so she said it'd be good for me to actually come here and speak as a citizen and let you guys hear it from somebody else. That's why I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah, so thank you.
We'll check into it. Anyone else? Linda?
Linda Sharkus, 4th Avenue. I have 2 different issues I'd like to talk about. During COVID, information for planning and zoning was posted online, what the plans were, what the deficiencies, and now that we're back doing meetings in person, none of that stuff is available. It's difficult, if you want to be involved, to get down to the borough and go review the plans. The first day, I tried to look at the last zoning board meeting. April actually had the day off. Could you imagine? But, I know, it was great. But unfortunately, I didn't have time after that to go look at the plans. So I'm hoping that we could put those plans for both zoning and planning back online to increase the transparency that everybody's been talking to tonight.
Can we do that, April?
Yes.
Are you doing it now?
No, we aren't. A lot of the towns stopped doing it, actually. It's easy to do when you have an architect or an engineer and attorney involved, because it's very easy for them to make the PDF copies, and it becomes a little more difficult for the average homeowner that they don't have a scanner and things like that, but we can work on that.
Okay. Yeah, even if we require a PDF copy or something like that.
I mean, we can't, I don't think that we can require it, but we asked for it during COVID, we asked for it because we weren't allowing people in the building. But now we are allowing people in the building, and my staff has been advised where those files are so that they can show them to the public in case I'm not there.
All right, we'll work on that.
Okay, my second question is concerning the environmental impact of, for instance, the church on 7th Avenue coming down. Concrete, has silica, has fiberglass in it. it's terrible when it comes down, but it was even worse to see that it was ground on site. Did the neighbors receive notices that this grinding process was going to take place, that maybe they should close all their windows? Did we monitor air quality around it? And the reason I ask, there's a number of buildings that are masonry and old that may be coming down in the near future, and I'm hoping we could put a plan in place to at least notify the people so they close their house and maybe check on it, because you have the Hebrew school on 11th, that's, you know, hopefully one of these days it'll come down. And if they grind, or, you know, I don't understand why this stuff wasn't removed rather than grinding in place. This is the first I've seen this on borough property. And then we also have 35, the 3 buildings, if we ever get to an acceptable design, there's plenty of space for them to grind at all also. And I think we should be concerned that we don't end up with lung problems as a result of this procedure. Thank you.
Okay, we'll look into it. Yes?
How you doing, Mark? Wayne Thielen, 501 15th Avenue. So this is the first borough meeting I've been to in quite some time. And it seems like there's a lot of intimidation going on within this town. At one time you had a young man in the DPW that was being verbally intimidated. Then we have this eminent domain. In the way I'm seeing it, that seems like a form of intimidation to the folks that own it. And then on the 17th of June, your borough administrator attempted to intimidate myself at my house. Now, I sent an email about the construction, deconstruction that was going on 15th. It's completed. I'm satisfied. But when your borough administrator comes to this, to my house, to the street, and I'll give him credit because he was the only one that showed up during the 3 or 4 months that it happened. And that's great. I'm glad you showed up. But when he comes to my house and asks, "Are you Thielen?" And you've known me since I was a little kid. So have you. You've known me since I was a child. I've lived here for 52 years. I've called Belmar my home, except for the 20 years that I was in the military. And I tried an attempt to intimidate me? Sorry, it's not going to happen. 9 combat tours, he's not going to intimidate me. He told me, "You were supposed to call me." No. First chance that he had to leave. I have nothing to say to you. Everything I said was in my email. That's all I got to say. Got back in his car. There were some other words said. He got back out of his borough car when he was on borough time, proceeded to advance on my house, calling me, "You're a punk. You won't do," I don't even know if I'm allowed to say it, explicitive. "You're not going to do anything. You ain't nothing." Really? You're not going to intimidate me. I came down off of my steps and I met him on the sidewalk. Now, is that my property? It is when it snows because I have to clear it. It is when it breaks, I have to fix it. But he comes onto my sidewalk, face to face, and I have my neighbor Gary that saw the whole thing. My other neighbor Bob is down in Florida right now doing electrical work for a hurricane. I have witnesses that seen it. Is that the policy of this town to try to intimidate longtime residents? Yes or no? And I hope your eye heals up. I'm sure it's not. So, what's going to be done?
Well, it's the first time I'm hearing about it, so we'll...
Well, at first, what I wanted to do, I tried to get a hold of Mr. Brennan, because I've known Mr. Brennan for a while. He's been a teacher to all of my children. I sent him, and it was very unofficial, because I don't have his number, and I know where he lives. Everyone knows where he lives. He just listened for the music. I wanted to have a talk with him before I came here and did this, but I didn't have time. I had an appointment that I had to go to. Now I'm back. All right? So that's what your borough administrator attempted to do to me. I'm not going to be intimidated. The residents of this fine town are not going to be intimidated.
All right, this process that is going to happen, you'll have a police officer come and take your statement.
Sergeant Yee was there. He was there. He was on duty that day.
Do you take your statement?
There was
Well,
no statement.
I'll find it.
There was no statement taken.
Well, we're gonna do.
Because, see,
We'll do an internal affairs investigation.
I'm grown. I'm a grown man now. I don't need a statement like that. What I want is an apology from you. That's what I want. There it goes.
The only thing I'm going to say now is that
do-
as this involves a personnel matter.
Do the investigation now.
Further public comments on it.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm just going to instruct the Borough Council to have no more further public comments, only because it does involve a personnel issue. But thank you, sir, for your comments.
So do the investigation now, because you've seen it. You've seen it for yourself, and everyone on wherever this is being streamed has seen it too. Good job there, Mark. Thank you.
Yes, Sharon, go ahead.
Sherry Russo, 1218 Briarwood Road to Belmar. First, I want to say I had absolutely no previous notion that I was going to stand up and speak. However, Councilman McCracken, who I don't know that I remember you coming here a lot on when it was the former mayor and council. I used to be here a lot then, and I would stand up and speak then if I had a problem, but I don't remember you standing up and speaking then. Am I correct, or did you come here a lot in previous mayor and council meetings to stand up as a member of the community?
Sherry, if you'd like to make some comments, go ahead.
If I just asked a question, did you speak then? That would be
I
yes or
can't
no,
recall
or
every
simply.
meeting in town that
Oh,
I've
any?
attended and I've
Did you?
spoken, so I'm sorry, I'm not on trial
So,
here.
I guess the problem is that, I mean, I am not going to run for office again. I don't know what your notion is. However, you said, this was what I wrote down, what you said, you have a problem with people who accuse you. However, you certainly accused me of coming up here because I ran for office. Now, oddly enough, the speech that you just gave sounded pretty much the same as your tax speech that you gave before you voted to raise our taxes. It was kind of the same speech. It was almost like a little bit of like, you know, the same thing, which I find very interesting. Also, we're all talking about like the first aid building, like the former mayor, who's an attorney, isn't the attorney on that. I mean, this isn't some nobody that is representing first aid. It's the former mayor and an attorney. So I take it that what the former mayor and an attorney is doing is something legal. Like that it is a legal thing.
We didn't say it was illegal.
Right, but so we're talking about things like, oh, this was wrong and that was wrong. You know, it's someone who's doing it, there's an attorney working on it, you know? I just wanted to make that point. But I really find offense to the fact that, like, you know, if somebody is part of the town, you know, in the former administration, I stood up when there was a problem that I had. I told that administration plenty of problems back in the day. Other people that stood up today and agreed with me, I disagreed with them back then on things. I don't understand how someone can be elected and have such a problem with members of the town coming up to speak. Now, I believe in a two-party system. I know a lot of people believe in a multi-party system, but the way I grew up, my father was a former Marine and Air Force, and we were always taught two-party system. And more than half of my friends are the opposite party of me. So this is not a party issue. This is not a political issue. This is not a, oh my God, I ran for office, now I gotta say something. I was saying something when it was the past administration. So I think that that is uncalled for and unnecessary. The mayor's never said anything to me ever. I don't know what the issue is here, but I just wanted to call attention to that. I find it funny that you have a problem with people that accuse you, yet that's what you're doing.
Sherry,
Odd.
Sherry, let's come back to the microphone.
Because?
I'm sorry if I offended you. I'm going to apologize. I mean that. What comes...
And the other people. You offended other people that are in here. That is a horrific thing to say about people, that we have an agenda because I'm an opposite party.
And anybody else that I offended, that was certainly not my intent. What is discouraging is that the facts with the sale first aid squad have been exaggerated and twisted. They're just not
By
true.
who?
I'm not gonna say anybody, because then.
But once again, the attorney is representing, who's the former mayor, the attorney is representing them. So if you're saying that the facts are exaggerated and twisted, like I printed out some stuff here, like, I don't know.
Let me just
See,
finish my
this
comments.
is Pringle's stuff that he wrote about
Let me
you.
just
I'm not
finish
like
my
making
comments.
stuff up in
So
my head.
It's discouraging when you're on a council, trying to get the facts out, trying to be transparent, trying to do the best for the town, and there are people, whether intentionally or not, misrepresenting what happened and what the actual situation is. I hope it's unintentional. I hope it's not political, because if it is, it's not going to get this town where we need to go. My intent was not to offend anybody, hurt anybody's feelings. It's just discouraging at times when you're constantly bombarded by people who are what appears to be misrepresenting the facts for their own personal gain. And that's what I'm saying. It doesn't matter.
That isn't me misrepresenting the facts for my own personal gain. You just said that to me.
Didn't say it was you. Said it's just generally happening. And what I'm saying is whether you're Republican, Democrat, Green Party, it doesn't make it different. That's just not healthy for our town. We cannot continue to do that.
What if it's not a party issue? Have you considered that?
It probably isn't, because there are people from both parties. I mean,
Correct.
some people from the opposite party of me have said that I was directing those comments to them. I'm not. There were other people who are sitting in the same party who are friends of mine that came up. So please don't take it personally. I apologize if I offended you or anybody else. That was not my intent.
And if I could just clarify one thing, nobody's ever accused Mr. Pringle of doing something illegal.
Oh, absolutely,
I just want
yes.
to make
Yep,
that perfectly
I think
clear.
that-
He's
right,
a
my
well-respected
point
member of
just-
the bar,
yes.
So just.
Yep,
just
I
want you to
think
make-
that
make
he,
perfectly clear.
yep, I think that he is an attorney and he's the mayor, and I think he's very knowledgeable on both those things, because I think once you're the mayor, you must have a ton of knowledge, and then in addition to that, he's an attorney. And those two things combined, I think, make him like very knowledgeable on the first aid, and he's representing the first aid. And so my point is, that's why I feel that the papers that he have here that I printed out, I don't know, like, they're from him. Like, I'm not talking about like, oh, I made up some gossip here. I'm talking about either what the mayor has said in the past, what's written down on anything that I've printed up online. Like, I don't know where this is coming from, that like, oh, this is all blasphemy. Like, I printed it up. Like, from the attorney, it says Pringle and Quinn and Anzano, who I'm probably gonna butcher his name, sorry, written on the top, like.
Well, you have to remember that not everything is captured on the four corners of the piece.
No,
of paper,
absolutely.
Which is where there's room for interpretation, and that's where
Right.
miscommunication was. So that was the intent of several of the members' comments earlier, where they were just trying to clarify where that misunderstanding was, because I can see how you could read one piece of paper and say,
I
this
mean,
says this,
right.
but in
If you
reality,
can
the
sort of
story of the
read it.
matter
Yes.
was the opposite. So
Right.
I understand, and I just.
Right, but I do, and my comments today were about the fact that, originally that, we had the money and my, my comments weren't about anything that could have been, I mean, they were literally about things that were said by the mayor, and that, we were said we had the money, and my feeling is if we're putting out a bond for 1.5 million, then we could have given First Aid 500,000 and saved $1 million. That's not like gossip, it's just subtraction. But so I really have, like, I think that, like, I don't know, I'm always one to reach across the aisle to the other party. Like, I don't really have this, like, party thing where, like, oh, I have more friends of Republicans than are Democrats. And so I think that, when you get elected to mayor and council, if you can't handle or you don't expect that people are coming to have a different opinion than you, Belmar probably wouldn't be the place. Do you know? I mean, Belmar has always had so much controversy. People always have come up to the microphone. And so, I don't know, now this is like such a big surprise that like there's opposing people in the town on this issue. And I think that's really like, I don't know. You know, it's said in also a time that like, I couldn't get up after you said it because that's it. You get the last comment and now I'm done. Now I have to speak in public session when it shouldn't have even had to happen. And so if your feeling is, do you know that the only reason the people are coming up here is because we're the opposite party? We have a political agenda. I ran for office once. Someone else that stood up ran for office once. Someone else lives in town and they have an agenda. That's the deal with being a part of a town. That people have differences in opinion. And when you're an elected official, being that we all know I ran for office, I would have been in that position. What, you think nobody would have said anything to me? I was gonna, if I won, do you think I was gonna sit there and expect that everybody would never say a word against me? That's unreasonable to think that the whole town is just gonna go along with you because we trust that you're making a hard decision. We know that there's tough decisions to be made, absolutely. But to call us out and say, it's your party and you do this all the time, do you know, it was going on when Zoom was going on. That's not, I think that's absolutely ridiculous. And that's all. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yeah, Mike.
Again, Mayor, Council, Mike Seabeck, 110 Second Avenue. I'm going to be real brief. Thank you guys very much. I know Councilman Cracken, we're a little discouraged also because we come looking for the facts and the details, and we do read things in the paper. And the gentleman from 15th used the word intimidation. You know, eminent domain is all about intimidation, and that's what raises the juices of people to understand what's going on. So I guess I have this utopian thought that one day we're going to come to a meeting and a guy like Jerry's going to stand up and say, well, maybe you should put it to the people and let's see what they think. And the whole council's going to go, you know what, that's a great idea. Maybe we should just put a referendum out there and put it to the people. Because quite frankly, in the absence of the facts, when Mark, I understand your reliance on the professionals that are appointed, but we didn't elect the professionals that are appointed, and if we don't have the information, we basically have to sit here in the audience and go based on what we have. So we do come seeking the facts. And at the end of the day, the facts are going to tell on both sides of a negotiation who's negotiating in good faith, bad faith, whose terms are unreasonable, whose terms may be reasonable. All of this stuff is what we come here looking for. And we're unified in that as residents and taxpayers. The political nonsense is nonsense. Public safety is super important. Councilman Cracken, I totally agree with you, and I understand that. But quite frankly, you know, there's a lot of people in this audience that are really bright people that come here week in and week out and over the years, and the thought of putting together committees and seeking more input, I think is very valuable to all of us. So with that said, all I want to ask is, rather than feel like you're being attacked, just look at it as people seeking information and asking questions and wanting to know what's going on, and maybe get some of them, more of them involved. Thank you very much. Have a great night.
Mike, thanks for those comments. I couldn't agree with you more. And you know, you have an excellent approach when you come to these meetings. You're fair, you're balanced, you understand. And I wish everybody who came up and spoke to Mike, you know, had the same approach as you.
Well, we're all looking for respect on both sides, Jim, and I thank you also. I know it is a tough job, and you do have to make decisions. Some like them, some don't. Cheers. Have a great night.
Anyone else? All right, April.
Can I have a motion to close the public session and adjourn the meeting?
Motion.
All in favor?
Thank you, everyone.